Good evening, workshoppers. Now, I admit, I wasn't expecting this episode to go through and cover a lot, but coming into this weekend, man, we actually had quite a bit to talk about, and then even this week, we've seemed to have even more things to go through and talk about. So it's some interesting times, some definitely interesting times to go through and start checking things out. We've got a lot going on in the realm of Diablo across multiple titles. I guess across almost all of the titles within the Diablo franchise right now. Besides little technical difficulties, we got quite a bit to go through and check out here tonight. Of course, we have one of the first things I want to go through and mention is we do have a new community manager that's gone through and has taken over for the entirety of the Diablo franchise. It is let me see, Adam Fletcher. He also goes by Pez Radar on Twitter, and he used to work for Blizzard as one of the esports managers. I believe he worked on the Heroes of the Storm team beforehand, before going through and leaving. And then now he has come back to Blizzard to work with the Diablo franchise, and so he's not taking over Nevelistus's position, who is just like community manager, but he is in charge of like kind of like the global team that covers everything in terms of Diablo. So he would be in the position that would have been Nevelistus's boss. And so they still haven't filled the two remaining positions that they have for community managers, but I'm sure now that they actually have the person that's running the show, that will hopefully facilitate that those other positions will be getting filled in short order, since so when you have the lead in place, that they can kind of go through, they know what they're looking for their team, and they can help build it up. Or there's specific applicants that are in the final phase of employment that he would be the one that have kind of like the final say on who he wants to work with, who he wants on his team, how he wants to develop that team, and what forth. We welcome Adam back to Blizzard, and we welcome Adam in the Diablo community here with a nice big warm welcome. And coming from that, there are actually quite a few things to go through and discuss as far as what community managers could be up to. One of the first things is this weekend, or a couple days ago, it was discovered that Blizzard had published a vendor build for Project Fenris. And as we all remember from the Kotaku article a couple of months ago, or I guess it's almost like a year and a half ago now, that the Project Fenris was the development name for Diablo 4. And so this is something that they found over on MMO Champion, that Blizzard's kind of content delivery system, their CDNs, had loaded what was flagged as Fenris Vendor Build 2. Now, I'm not as familiar with the terminology and such, but the thing that a vendor build is that normally it's something that is sent to third parties when they're farther along in development. So that way they can work on like a core component of the game, or something that they can go through and see, because these vendor builds are encrypted, so it's next to impossible in order to get into them. So data mining's out of the question. There's nothing that we can learn from it besides the fact that it exists. Now, I don't think that Diablo 4 is anywhere as far along in production that would necessitate them actually sending it out to third parties for work. What I think that this is probably just an update for the developers that are working at home, so that way they have easier access to the game code in order to work or develop on changes. As I've been talking about in the last couple of episodes, what exactly has the development process for D4 changed, or what does it look like now, with the whole scenario of the staff working from home, and the complete change in the kind of like the work mentality of how the development is going on at Blizzard. But it is pretty cool to go through and see that there are some big updates that are going on in the background. We've seen some changes. We've seen some things moving. And of course, going through and talking about developer updates, another thing that we had here about a week ago, is that someone was going through and tweeting at Candace Thomas, who is one of the senior producers on Diablo 4, when we would be expecting to see the next quarterly development update from the development team. And the community team has gone through and said that they're aiming for the end of June, which of course that's pushing it, to the end of quarter two, which is, kind of expected, is what we kind of expected with the first quarterly update. But we got that one a little bit early with the end of February. But Diablo fans being Diablo fans, it was like the second week in February, and people were crying that, oh, they lied, they're never going to go through and publish it. February is almost over. It has 15 days left in the month, but people are still going through and freaking out, like, just a few days into February, like, where's the development update? Where's the development update? So I imagine that probably June 1st, people are going to start making huge threads on Reddit, going through and demanding that the developer update, that it's June, it's the end of June, it's June 2nd, we need the update now. But hey, it just shows that they're passionate, they care, they want the info. There's a big need, and it does make me wonder what the size and the scope of this particular update's going to be. Not just because of the way development has kind of been, thrown topsy-turvy with the world situation going on right now, but more so, the first dev update, they said that they were giving us a twofer by showing the UI changes and then some of like the lore and character updates that they had, for that cannibal tribe. And so, is that going to be the standard size of the developer updates, or is that twice it? And so that will only get half that size and just a couple of pictures and a little bit of an update in this next patch? Or is it going to be something that we'll see, a bit more concrete info because they're further along and going through and producing things? Have they actually implemented the ancient, angelic, and demonic power system so that way they can show off maybe a brief clip of it in action or how it works? Maybe they can show us a little bit more on some ideas that they had with the talent system or skills. There's a lot there. We have no idea what they've been focusing on. Where the main drive for development has been going through and heading. And some of those things I think that they kind of need to, you need to master that angelic and demonic system and how that ties into itemization before you can really, really work on itemization. You can do some high level concepts, but it's if this system is based on this system, this one has to come first. The core mechanic has to be in there and has to be functioning before you can build anything else that's derived from it. So I'm sure that some of those concepts or ideas are probably, there's some guy that's sitting in the corner going through and it's like, oh, I know, and then this item will spawn multiple hurricanes, and this item will actually like leave an avatar of your werewolf form if you shapeshift out of it to go through and give you a damage increase by copying your moves for a couple seconds. Some guy that's just going through and just spitballing ideas and having his own little dev jam, pushing out all these concepts and such while they wait for the itemization to actually get there and start implementing it, and then balancing numbers and all other types of stuff. The balancing numbers and other types of stuff is probably still honestly like a long ways away. If we're looking at like an end of 2021, early 2022 update, it's at least a year away, from them really getting into the balancing cycle of it. They've got to get the game, playable and usable first, right? That's definitely what I would expect, at least if I was working in development. But I'm not a developer, so I don't know. I take everything that I say with a grain of salt in that. But that at least is a nice, good confirmation that they are going to continue to bring forth those quarterly updates. They that we'll be getting it at the end of June, but at least we'll be going through and getting it, within quarter two, as has previously been promised. Though we don't have any Diablo 3 news per se to cover. We still no word on the PTR. Hopefully by the time that the next episode rolls around, I'll be able to go through and talk more about PTR and such, because I expect that we'll hopefully have it here by the end of May, if not the beginning of June, at the absolute latest. But I do remain hopeful that by the next episode, we'll have something to talk about. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But like I said, we do have a little bit to talk about for all of the franchises or all of the games within Diablo 3, and not to be left out, I do have some stuff. As I was talking about on a previous episode where we had one of the early Diablo 3 Blizzard concept artists that was on Reddit and going through and talking about some of those things, we actually have had over on PureDiablo.com, which is kind of like the successor to Diablo Inc. Gamers. It's, Rush and Ellie going through and putting together their own, standalone Diablo fan site that's kind of removed from like that Inc. Gamers PC Masters branding and such. It's just its own standalone thing. And here they managed to go through and get some early concept art from Oscar Cuesta, who's been publishing a lot of his work over on ArtStation.com about his time at Blizzard North. And now these are going to be some screens from very early in the Diablo 3 development when it was still at Blizzard North. And these pictures that he has, these photos, are from a very, very early technical build in 2005. And so these are some of the early works that Blizzard North had created and their ideas for the different acts and zones that existed within Diablo 3 and their version of the build. And it is pretty cool going through and seeing that some of those themes lived from the Blizzard North implementation to the Blizzard implementation. So we have like that, corrupted heaven look. We have the not necessarily Westmarch, but like that kind of like European bastion look. Because I believe in the screenshots it was listed as Winterstone, so it's probably like the Bastion's keep that they kind of like went through and took over. But like there was some holy halls and stuff like that. And I just wanted to zoom in on a couple of these to just kind of give a closer look. They're kind of like it still had that whole kind of fleshy corruption going along and those angelic things. And the thing that he does note with these concept arts is that they're very low polygon, and these are basically from just testing things out within the build itself. Here's a picture saying like those the kind of like cathedral castle look was this place called Winterstone, which is something new. That Winterstone was never something in Diablo or Diablo lore before, just like Bastion's Keep never existed before. So this was a new place that the Blizzard North team was going through and working on to go and show in a little bit more detail within their game. And we see the potions and like the little the menus that were very reminiscent of Diablo 2 there, the mana bar, this little placeholder for attack and immolation aura, going through and zooming in on the character. You have got the double quivers on the back. So it's a little cool thing, that going through, and we're seeing more of some of the old guard going and showing the stuff that they worked on from the multiple versions of Diablo 3 that existed through the early years there. And again, even though some of those screens were like heavily pixelated and stuff, I mean, they are from 2005. They're an upgrade from the looks of Diablo 2, despite the fact that they're kind of like a non-production poly count, but it still I think looks pretty good, and it looks pretty interesting. It's like kind of like their take, and obviously it's a grittier, more realistic look on it than the route that they ended up taking with Diablo 3. Diablo 3 definitely went with a more painterly style, and as we talked about in the previous episode, that one of the reasons why they went with that is that it ages better, because even though those that concept art from the early Diablo 3 is low polygon count and such, if you had gotten something along those lines to say ship, if that game had shipped like 2008, 2009, it would definitely be showing its age by now. It's something that you'd be seeing it in it. It's just if you have an older game of that nature, it's it will have a little bit problems keeping up if you go for a more realistic look, and that's a problem that I think Diablo 4 might face, depending upon how much they want to kind of build on like the stylization of the game and such. If they go for the more realistic looking route, it of course will show. Like go through, what was the game? Cryptek was Cryptic, the game from like the mid 2000s that could only run on like high end video cards, and this is like the future of gaming and stuff like that. And of course, it doesn't really hold up all that well nowadays. Not a lot of things that go for more realistic looks, last for more than 5 or 6 years before they begin to just show their age. It's like the more it's the whole concept of the uncanny valley. The more realistic that you get, the more it will get scrutinized. And then also, as new technology comes out, they'll be able to do better with shading, textures, and all other types of stuff. And so what is realistic will change, because I remember the D2 cinematics were some of the most realistic, most awesome looking cinematics I had ever seen back in 2001. And then they came out with like the Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne cinematics, and watching Arthas go through and climb the stairs up to the Frozen Throne on the Ice Crown Glacier, and that was freaking epic. And then after that they have the opening cinematic to World of Warcraft, and it's just, it always gets bested by the thing that comes after it. And then I'll save you all, because I know that you probably are tired of me talking about it. But Diablo Immortal, they did have a conference call, an earnings call last week. That once we got the kind of like the light items on the talk itself, they did confirm that Diablo Immortal is still set for regional testing coming mid this year. So summer for the northern hemisphere, winter for the southern hemisphere, but middle of this year. So we're hoping maybe end of June, early July, that we'll get some regional testing and some actual looks into Diablo Immortal. The way that they've been with being very tight-lipped about it and not really wanting to go and show or talk about Diablo Immortal that much, and it's understandable. Anytime, heck, even when the Diablo account tweets something about Diablo 3, people still post phone jokes. So, you just don't poke the bear. We'll release it when it's ready, and we'll start talking about it when it's ready. It makes sense. But I do hope that when they go through and they start that regional testing, that they'll at least be open for streaming or discussing it. I don't know if they're gonna maybe put associate it with NDAs, and so there's not a lot that people will be able to talk about. But I do hope that we will get some updates and see more of the game once that testing starts, and that we won't have to wait until the game actually launches to really see too much more about it. But like I said, won't take too much of your time on that one. And then finally, in our last little bit of news, we have something that I found a little bit strange, and that is the often rumored Diablo 2 remaster, which after having some discussions with some like other people in the community and a lot of discussions with Riker, was one of those ones that was always kind of like, well, you hear talk about a Diablo 2 remaster a lot, but there's like zero like credible rumors to back it up, or there's zero actual sources or anything like that have even discussed it. There's just, it's something that gets discussed so much, but nothing backs it up. Like even when they had that Kotaku article from 2018 that went through and talked about the failed Dark Souls, the Project Hades version of Diablo and such, that it went through a bunch of iterations, and it talked about even the canceled Diablo 3 expansion, the King in the North, and such, that it just completely had no mention whatsoever of a D2 remaster even on the radar, and that to me kind of killed any substance that might have existed until now. And so it was a French gaming site, Actu Gaming, that went through and originally reported it. And for those that are French speaking, you can go over there and check it out. But it basically is going through and discussing that there is a Diablo 2 remaster in production, called Diablo 2 Resurrection. That's being developed by Vicarious Games, which is a subsidiary of Activision. And Vicarious Games, has been actually responsible for a couple of ports in the past that they've used for some of their back titles, such as they're the ones that worked on the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, and they were also the ones that helped Bungie port Destiny 2 over to PC, because it is a kind of like a console first game. And now it seems that they might be the ones that are actually going through and working on a Diablo 2 remaster. And of course, we've discussed this on the show plenty in the past, that it kind of makes sense for a Diablo 2 remaster to be like the last one of their classic games to go out there. Mostly because, as David Brevik and some other of the original developers have talked about, the original source code kind of was lost. And so a lot of those original files, textures, and stuff like that were all gone. And so it's just what you had in the game code itself, not the original things that were then, put into it to go back and find and kind of like re-up the textures from the original sources. So that way you weren't having to compress them down. It's his thoughts on it were that if they were to go through and do something like that, so many of the assets would have to be completely remade from scratch. And who knows? It's been quite some time, and the reports are at least that it has been in development for a while, and that it has a release date of Q4 of 2020. Which is, of course, this year. And now that's one of the ones that came as a kind of like a big shock, is not just that it is a confirmation that it is in development, but the confirmation that, hey, it's going to release this year. And as we've seen over reported on Reddit, is that Blizzard has recently announced that they are joining the whole Summer of Gaming, which is taking the place of a lot of the video game conventions and such that got canceled, E3, more than likely Gamescom and such. And so a lot of the developers are putting together this big, long, multi-month web series where they're going through and announcing like the next things that they have, going through, coming out for games. And Blizzard just joined the lineup, and could they, use that as the place to go and discuss that, hey, we're working on a D2 remaster? Potentially. I'm sure that they'll probably want to at least put it out there beforehand, and hopefully that it'll be closer to a StarCraft remastered than it will be a Warcraft 3 reforged, as we all know that came to a very rough launch, and that there were a lot of problems that plagued the development. It was one of those ones that was kind of like Blizzard was accused of just pushing it out the door to release it, despite knowing that there was a lot of bugs. The animation and the texture quality wasn't up to Blizzard standards, and that it was handled poorly enough that it ended up getting a response from Blizzard president J. Allen Brack. We'll have to wait and see on that one, whether first, of course, if it ends up even being true, or if they actually will meet this 2020 release date. And then one of the final things I wanted to go through and discuss, and I accidentally closed that browser window, but there is a new Tyrael Funkopop. This was a bit more lighthearted, but there's a new Tyrael Funkopop that's going to be going through and coming out soon. This one, unfortunately, is exclusive to GameStop, so it's the only place that you'll be able to get it, but it is going on pre-order and will be officially launching next Tuesday, the 26th. So, if you don't have the one of the original Tyrael Funko Pops, that I believe that those were like a convention exclusive only, generally for I think they were like PAX East, they had a Tyrael, and then Heroes of the Storm Demonic Tyrael and such that were like the only places that you could get your hands on those. This one is a bit more open and out there for people to go through and pick up, though of course it is available only at GameStop, which has been having its own share of issues and problems lately. with how everything is being handled, and of course how they've been handling the crisis and all that. But yeah, that's it's quite a bit of news and updates that we had coming along here. I'm excited to see what we might have to talk about in the next episode. I do hope that we will be getting a bit more information on the plans for the next season of Diablo 2. I understand that development would have been affected by the COVID-19 shutdowns and such, but shouldn't hopefully be too much longer before we get updates there. And then hey, we're only about a month and a half away from getting a new D4 developer update, and I'm having to internalize the acceptance that BlizzCon is more than likely not happening this year, and so it'll probably have to wait and see what they might have planned as far as how they're going to communicate that information, out to the public, for what they might have been prepping for the D4 updates. And actually, now that I'm talking about that out loud, gives me the idea of maybe that's something that they could do. If they're going to come to the acceptance that BlizzCon is canceled, that they can use that time to do bigger quarterly updates, to where, like, even though we had I think that the one that they did in February was a decent size and showed a lot of information. If they were talking about itemization or skill systems in that same amount of space, I think people would have been a lot happier, because there was some little bit of pushback, because it was more talking about like UI and some like lore fluff, character design and such, when the Diablo community, at least the vocal Diablo community, is very hardcore, very very numbers intensive, number crunching, and so that's what they want some hard substance. And if the development update doesn't have anything regarding any of those topics, they'll of course there'll be some pushback. But I think that if they were to talk about items in that length of an update, that people would have that would have settled that hardcore community that's wanting that deeper look into the actual like big in-game systems and such that Blizzard probably has barely even begun work on. But if they say expand it beyond even that scope, if they make those dev updates even longer, because hey, we've got like probably 2 or 3 panels that we would have covered at BlizzCon, that we can't do because BlizzCon's canceled, we can then fold those into like maybe the Q3, Q4 developer updates. And so we can get like these really big, juicy, kind of like maybe even with a presentation from the developer, like these little, 30 or 45 minute like videos of developer updates and such. And then not to mention the amount of development time that could be saved by not making a BlizzCon demo or not making a BlizzCon build. I know in the chat of the last episode, there's a lot of discussion about how could they do a demo that they could go through and release, to the public. And there's also a conversation that was had, in some of the Twitter conversations and such with like Dread, Leviathan, SVR and such. It's just, I don't think that there's any way they could do a downloadable demo, just because usually it's built on the base game files, which of course would have all of the developer notes and links and systems and stuff of everything else that exists in the game, even if it's not implemented. And that is just too much to lose in that respect with what could be gleaned from data mining. So we'll see. Obviously Blizzard has gotten better at being able to encrypt chunks of PTRs and alphas and such to hide things in the game files, like, because like when it comes to data mining, the WoW community, like they have that down to a science, whether it be through MMO Champion or Wowhead. They own data mining to the extreme, but Blizzard has still found ways of hiding information. Of course, there's always, you're going to encrypt chunks of the PTR files that they just, at that point, you can't get into. But like a lot of these, secret quest lines and such that they've been doing in WoW, that people have been unsuccessful in being able to data mine fully. They'll have bits and chunks, like they'll find the mount, but they have no idea how to get there. And so it's a lot of interesting cat and mouse game that they have going on between like the developers and the data miners to go and find that stuff. But yeah, that's going to bring this episode to a close. I thank you all for going through and joining me here tonight. For those tuning in live, for those that go through and listen at home, I definitely thank you for watching this video or downloading it, on your podcasting platform of choice. I always appreciate any comments or feedback that you might have on the show. Please, if you have anything to say, send me an email at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. Or leave a comment on YouTube, or a feedback or a review over on iTunes or Stitcher. Would definitely appreciate that. And of course, you can always you can follow the show, blizzpro.tv, or sorry, twitch.tv/blizzpro. I stream here live every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then you can also catch the episodes on YouTube over at BlizzPro, or on iTunes, Stitcher, I think like the Google Music Store, and a whole bunch of other podcasting hosting platforms. You can also follow the show at the WM Workshop on Twitter. You can follow me personally at 9ballgamer on Twitter, or twitch.tv/9ball for that once in a lifetime stream that I do. Once in a lifetime stream at the beginning of every season. I managed to get the wherewithal in order to go and stream. But yeah, you can also go through and check out all the Diablo news and such over at diablo.blizzpro.com. And obviously shout out to the sources that I used in this episode. Of course, the website that I write for, diablofans.com, and then purediablo.com for those great early looks at Diablo 3. And with that, thank you all for joining me here, and I'll catch you all next time. But wait, there's more. So while going through getting the podcast ready to be uploaded, I've been uploading the podcast pretty much like the Wednesday of the week after I do the live recording. And of course, between then and now, we've had the announcement that the patch 2.6.9 PTR is going to be starting tomorrow, May 21st, which is a Thursday, and it's going to be lasting for 2 weeks. So I felt that probably would be best to go through and add just a little bit of a clip here at the end to go through and take some of my first reactions. And man, this one is going to be changing things up. Though, if you're listening to this, you're probably more of a hardcore player. So you probably for reasons that you expect. Of course, we've got the new sets coming for the Demon Hunter, which looks pretty cool. The new set coming for the Necromancer, which looks really awesome. But there's a lot of nerfs in it as well. The Witch Doctor Spirit Barrage build, the Phantasms no longer count as pets, so that's greatly reducing its damage. No more Tasker and Theos, no more Mask of Jerem, no more Enforcer Gem. It's losing a lot of buff multipliers. And then of course the change to the Reaper's Wraps, adding a 2-second internal cooldown on the getting resources from the health globes, means that rat runs are dead. Just the whole singularity build for mages is more or less gone. In addition to Haunted Visions, now you get to have the Simulacrum last forever, but it no longer duplicates Skeletal Mage. You still have the 2 that you cast, but now that it takes longer to reach max essence cap, and you no longer have a scaling percentage gain for that in a timely manner, it's going to be rough trying to cap your double essence through the Simulacrum. So the build is if it survives in some shape, which I don't see it really doing that much, it's not going to be the same. I know SVR has already been, hitting the Twitch channel and doing some really cool theory crafting and such. Is there a replacement? Can Contamination Mage take its place? No. But I'll be covering all of this probably in greater detail on the next episode, which I'll be recording live on May 27th. And then, of course, posting that, right at the end of the PTR over on June 3rd. for the YouTube and iTunes, podcasting platform choice, whatever. But yeah, I just wanted to go through and add this one in real quick at the end. But I thank you all for going through and listening, continuing to download, and I hope to see you all next time.